Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Cycles of Time podcast. This week is called The Intimacy of Aloneness. This is your cosmic energy report for August 25th through 31st, 2025. We are wrapping up August and heading into a very intimidating September, I will say, eclipse season, but maybe that's just me. We'll get into it. But for now, we'll focus on this last week of August. It's the first full week of Virgo season this week, and we just celebrated a new moon in Virgo last Friday, Friday night into Saturday morning. That new moon really initiated us into the season of the harvest goddess, and also the second eclipse season of 2025. It was kind of the first the last lunation that was not an eclipse for the next month. And so last week I was on a bit of a roll with writing, and so I wrote some bonus articles on Substack, one about the new moon and the connections that new moon made with all of the outer planets, as well as some horoscopes for the upcoming eclipse season in September. So you can check those out at cyclesoftime.substack.com. Just some extra stuff that I don't always record on the podcast, but I'm starting to do a lot more writing. It's just felt like it's been flowing through. So check those out. I hope you had a good new moon. Mine was really, really beautiful. And in the gate of sexuality, intimacy, vulnerability, there was just a lot of really beautiful, unexpected connections that happened for me that day. I was feeling very antisocial, but was invited to a couple of gatherings with friends. And it was just so nourishing to connect with people. And everyone that evening felt really able to connect from the heart in a way that isn't always the case. And so, yeah, it was beautiful. I felt like Virgo season started with just a lot of synchronicities. Like I went and bought some bread at the bakery and then took a wrong turn down a road here in Santa Fe where I live. And there was just an incredible amount of Virgin Mary and Guadalupe and angelic kind of imagery and statues and murals, and one of corn with sunflowers growing all around it, and just all of that imagery. It felt like I was taken down that road by fate, and it was like, here we are, Virgo season has arrived. And then meeting up with people in this very heart-centered way during the gate of intimacy felt like it all felt very aligned and appropriate. So I'd love to hear how your new moon went last week, how Virgo season is starting out for you, and how you're feeling about the upcoming eclipse season. Feel free to. You can always DM me or show up in the comments on Substack or here on anywhere you're listening to podcasts. And I do just want to say that I've gotten a lot of new subscribers recently, and so thank you to the newbies that are here who are joining Cycles of Time. It's really nice to have you here. For those of you who have signed up as paid subscribers to the Embody the Revolution membership, thank you for your support. I've sent out all the emails with links to the different calendars for the online breathwork meetups and workshops that we do, as well as the calendar of all of the upcoming astrology and human design transits, and the Virgo season workbook that's been sent out to all paid subscribers. If you would like to join as a paid subscriber for the cost of a cup of coffee a month, you do get a lot of goodies, and the community is building. So it's a fun place that's growing, and I'm excited to have all of you here for sure. And so without further ado, let's jump into this week ahead. We have the sun transiting through the human design gate of intimacy and sexuality, continuing through that transit until Thursday. And then it's going to be moving into the gate of Aloneness until next Wednesday. And we also have some astrological transits happening. Venus is entering Leo this week and then immediately making angles with all of the outer planets opposing Pluto. Then we have Uranus sextiling Neptune this week in an exact sextile. And Pluto, the lord of the underworld, is going out of bounds. And that's kind of a big deal. And I'll explain what that means in a bit if you haven't heard of that. So we are also in the Wheel of the Year in the direction west in the medicine wheel, which represents emotionality and fall, the element water, the stage of life of adulthood, the whooshing cycle, the Taoist five element cycle. We're in the element of earth, this kind of grounded energy after a season of fire. In the pagan season, we are still in this kind of season of Lamas or Lunasa as we head towards Mabon, the fall equinox at the end of September. And zodiac season, we're here in Virgo. So that kind of completes all of the wheel, all of the different elements of the wheel. And you can always find the diagram, the graphic of these intersecting wheels of the year on Cycles of Time Substack. It's in every article. I kind of highlight the wheel with where we are in it. And it's also pinned to the top on my Instagram at astrosomatics, astro.somatics, or Cycles of Time Podcast is another Instagram account. So for you visual learners, check that out. It's kind of helpful to see how all of these wheels of the year intersect and where we are elementally and archetypically in the wheel. But this week, as we begin Virgo season, the sun's moving through the gates of intimacy and then into the gate of aloneness. And to just go over a quick review of the 6 human design gates of Virgo season, I always like to split them down and kind of look at each one of these gates as like a 5 to 6 day micro season within the larger zodiac season. And I always find that it tells a beautiful storyline about how the evolution of that archetype takes place over the course of that month. And so we start with the archetype of the boundary dissolver in gate 59, the gate of sexuality and intimacy. Moving then to the sovereign, the gate 40, which is aloneness, and which we'll enter on Friday of this week. Then we enter the imaginal cell, the archetype of confusion and imagination, which is my birthday gate 64. And then after that, the realizer, gate 47, realization, kind of making things concrete after diving deep into imagination or confusion. And then the 5th gate of Virgo season is the peacemaker, and that's the gate of conflict or friction, gate 6. And then the final gate of Virgo season that brings us into the fall equinox and overlaps on the cusp of Libra season is the embodied, which is known as the determination of the self in human design, and that's gate 46. So the arc here is boundary dissolver, the sovereign, the imaginal cell, the realizer, the peacemaker, and the embodied. And I will be doing another episode about these gates, kind of telling the story through the lens of the harvest goddess, through the lens of the Virgin, Virgo, how these gates kind of connect to each other. I also I write about this in my Virgo season workbooks that I send out to paid subscribers. And you can also buy those workbooks on Etsy at Cosmic Odyssey Art is the way to access my Etsy, just cosmicodysseyart.com. And I've decided to sell them as kind of one-offs because I put a lot of work into these workbooks, and they have journaling questions and prompts and somatic exercises and rituals and lots of stuff for the month ahead. So since it is the beginning of Virgo season, get your hands on that and to kind of really dive into these different gates. But this week, we're moving through the first 2, the dissolving boundaries between hearts, gate of intimacy, and getting vulnerable and intimate with the world around us and with people in our spheres. And then after that, we kind of are going through the process of recognizing that in order to meet people that deeply, we need our golden bubble of alone time too. And oftentimes in these I Ching hexagrams, human design gates, as we transit across the wheel of the year, it moves from kind of one extreme to the other. There's definitely an ebb and flow in the way of water, where it'll be in Leo season, we had the gate of influence and then the gate of retreat immediately after that, and then jumping back out to the gate of leadership. And so it's kind of like there's always a little bit of ebb and flow. And this one is no different, going from deep intimacy into sovereignty. And so, yeah, it is in gate 20, yeah, gate 59, sexuality and intimacy is from August 23rd to 28th, so through Thursday. It's known as wind over water in the I Ching, and it is really just about, yeah, dissolving boundaries that keep us separate for better or worse. And this can show up as oversharing. That's definitely some way that it's shown up for me already, perhaps, of just like, wait, we're all connected, we're all heart-centered beings. Let's like drop the pretenses and share with each other. And then and it can also show up as like true just yeah, becoming honest with who we are and what it is that we wanna share from our hearts. So, it doesn't mean solely physical desire, this gate of sexuality, of course. It's definitely a deeper drive toward connection and just breaking through the walls of isolation. I think that Cancer and Leo season earlier in the summer are signs where we're really learning to be ourselves. We're going deep inward to our innermost feelings and kind of in the shell and our hidden desires. And then Leo season, we're learning about how we interface with the world as individuals and how we lead, but it's very me centered. It's heart centered, but it's like we're shining outward. And we're not necessarily anticipating or receiving as much in return during that hot fire season of Leo. And so as we enter Virgo, this first gate is really about connection. It's kind of the first time in the wheel of the year that we've gone through enough actualization as individuals and are really coming into context with the other. And that echoes the natural world. It's how the leaves are starting to fall from the trees, the grasses are starting to die. We're starting to see a little bit of coolness in the air and knowing that the season of death is around the corner, the season of decay, season of composting. And so we have the first hints of that. And I always look at the first half of the year, Aries through Virgo, as the season of life, when life is sprouting out and blossoming and flourishing. And then Libra season through Pisces season is the season, of course, here in the Northern Hemisphere, where the plants are starting to die and are going in kind of recombining with the soil, going back to the earth, completing that cycle of life. And for me, that really is an indicator of otherness, the fact that that is the time when we recognize that we are not, I am one plant sprouting out. And during the season of life, can be very self-contained and have to be because you're focusing on your growth. And then there's a season where you start to wilt and decay and combine with the soil, with everything else that has come before. For all of your ancestors and all of the millennia before, the soil is a collective compost of all of that. And so Virgo season is this really interesting mutable season in between the fire and aliveness of Leo and the true merging, the true balancing of life and death with Libra. And so it's really just it's hinting at the other, but it's still having a little bit of challenge with it. It's still summer. It's still, it's hot in the middle of the day. It's like you can still go swimming, but you want to also be connecting with the other side of the wheel. And so, yeah, in the I Ching, this first gate of Virgo season is known as dispersion, and it's kind of like the wind stirring the surface of water and creating ripples that move through everyone around you, and just really starting to connect with, yeah, like which grasses are green and sprouting upward, which grasses have already turned brown. It's like it's touching everything. And so these are the days this year where you may be really called to merge, whether it's body to body or heart to heart. I'm feeling it so much. This new moon at 0 degrees in this gate last week really activated this energy. And it feels very potent, like just more desire to share and be in that heart centered space. So, of course, there's shadows to all of these gates, and that's really described in the gene keys very well. The shadow to gift to city level in the gene keys. But the shadow of this particular gate that we're in is that intimacy without presence can feel kind of like a flooding, too much too fast, like an overwhelm, like this desire to just share and be connected. But there's definitely, yeah, a shadow side of that where if we're not aware of who and when and what we're sharing, it can be kind of a flooding outward that happens after building up so much pressure in the tension and in Cancer and Leo season and the seasons before. And so it's all about staying aware this week, meeting each other with awareness. This gate can teach us a lot about trust and about fertile creativity that comes from collaboration and union and deciding to drop pretenses and be honest with each other. So notice what dissolves this week, disperses when you let yourself really open. The gene key for 59 unfolds from the shadow of dishonesty to the gift of intimacy, and then ultimately it arrives at the city of transparency. And so, this teaching of this gate is basically saying that when we hide parts of ourselves, intimacy can't bloom truly. And dispersion dissolves the walls that we build, but it can also feel terrifying if we're used to putting on armor and used to having a facade or a face that we put on. So, the invitation this week is to lean into the opposite of dishonesty, into honesty, at first with ourselves and then with others. Risk letting other people see you for who you are in this very moment, and then you reach transparency. It's possible to this reach this highest octave of this energy when nothing is hidden and connection is effortless. But it's a dance, right? Connecting with others and figuring out right place, right time. It's definitely not something that's as easy. It's easier said than done, I'll say. But yeah, this week, notice where you keep a mask on, where you're kind of keeping yourself guarded. And think about the wind kind of slowly rippling the water. It's not like an instant change, but there's wind over water. Wind is kind of rippling the lake, the pond, and starting to make change through affecting the other. So yeah, it's kind of this clearing of stagnant waters when we allow other people's energy into our golden bubble. But then after that, on the weekend, Friday through next Wednesday, the sun transits into the gate of aloneness, gate 40, and this is known as thunder over water in the I Ching. It's also called deliverance in the I Ching, or yeah, the gate of aloneness, and is just kind of the counterbalance to all that merging that happened, no matter how subtle it was. And some new moon merging, first gate of Virgo season merging. You kind of then come to this place of needing to retreat a bit, needing to be alone and resting after the labor. Interpersonal dynamics are laborious in as terms of like, you know, mental, like, well, what was that interaction about? Or like, oh, should I text that person back? Or like follow up on what we talked about? Or, there's definitely some things that come up when we start getting intimate with others. And so the gate afterwards, yeah, over the weekend is more about kind of solitude after being in a crowd and retreating after deep connection, having intimacy with yourself. And this gate often shows up as kind of a tension between responsibility to the group and a deep need for personal space. So it's writing that line there. Since it's a Virgo gate, it is a service oriented energy, and it reminds us that service to others, intimate connection with others requires boundaries and knowledge that you can't keep giving from an empty well. It is kind of about liberation from feeling like you have to serve, I suppose. Kind of when to step back and when to fill your own reserves, when you can't pour from an empty cup. We've all heard that so many times, but it's true. It's kind of noticing like, when am I starting to like have my battery life tapped out? Like, and I need to go plug my phone in, instead of pushing it to the very end where the phone dies. That's happened too many times to me. But anyway, yeah, gene keys of this energy is gate 40 is the journey from exhaustion to resolve to divine will. So thinking about that phone dying, it's like if you let your phone exhaust itself because it's just given too much out of that sheer desire to be intimate and connected and transparent with the whole world. we recognize that can be exhausting and we can collapse. And, yeah, just pushing ourselves past our reserves. And it's really just a deep wisdom to learn for yourself what that is, what that reserve is socially, how much you can connect with others or serve others or give to others before you need to really start giving more back to yourself. And yeah, just, it's possible to collapse out of exhaustion through surrendering to other people's needs and desires and the energy of connecting. And one of my intentions last new moon, for the Virgo new moon, was it just kept coming up to me that night was surrender without collapsing, and really looking at and noticing the difference between surrender and collapse and how there's such a fine line there that we're all told to sometimes you do have to just surrender in life to larger forces. And that can feel really good to not be fighting against the tide all the time, but it can also lead to, like, if your body's not used to doing that and you've been in hypervigilance mode for a really long time, always trying to be in control of everything, and then you say, "Okay, I'm gonna surrender," that can lead to being in bed for a week, just like, wait, once I let something in, then it's like full on collapse. And I think that's all too common that, practicing how to surrender and titrate that surrender in amongst the control is an important skill that so many of us are not taught and so many of us don't have much practice with. So this week's energy, I mean, Virgo season is all about these subtle embodied wisdoms. It's this, yeah, it's very different than the growth oriented, more heady, or even more heart centered parts. Like Virgo is about digestion, and it's about that slower body processes that help us parse out what is good for us, what is not, how much is too much, how much is too little. And so the gift level here in the gene keys of resolve for gate 40 is about committing to what truly matters and surrendering to the things you truly can't control, but not surrendering to everything, right? And it's pacing ourselves. Resolve's not about working harder, but about aligning with what has real meaning for us and really having the wisdom to know the difference, right, between what is real and what's just like continuing to drain us. So at the city level, it is called divine will, and that is surrendering to a force greater than our personal effort. But again, it's so easy to collapse into that and become exhausted. So this feels very personal for me. I don't have any planets here. Actually, let me see. Do I? I should check. It's always nice to check these gates against your own personal chart. And if you don't have a human design chart, I do human design readings, and you can book them at astrosomatics.com on my website. A kind of a blend of astrology and human design. And I'd love to work with you and dig into the basics of your chart. You can also pull a free chart. I don't have it up on my site anymore, but I will be putting it back. But you can pull a free human design chart at Neutrino app is my favorite one, but there's lots of places online to do it. And you can just see if you have any of these gates I'm talking about active in your chart. And if there's a planet active, just means that there's a planet in that part of the sky, in that part of that sign when you were born, or 88 days before you were born at the end of the second trimester is like the secondary chart that's pulled for a human design body graph. And so it's kind of this subconscious and conscious energies that are at play in your personal world. But regardless, I feel very connected to this Virgoan energy of exhaustion to resolve to divine will and the kind of interplay between all of those. So, yeah, check out your chart. Let me know in the comments if you have gate 40 aloneness or gate 59 intimacy active and how those show up in your life as kind of constant forces. Like the thing about these energies is that as the sun transits through them or other planets transit through them, everyone in the collective feels that energy. But if it's in your birth chart, that means that the sun or another planet was there in that part of the sky, in that section of the zodiac when you were born, or in your subconscious development in the womb, and it kind of lingers through your life. It's a more present, constant thing that doesn't just come and go. Anyway, it's a little background for some of you who are not as aware of how this all works. And yeah, again, I'd love to dig deeper on a one-on-one level. It's one of my favorite things to do lately is dive into people's charts. So So hit me up if you're interested in checking out what is alive for you in your chart. But back to gate 40, just to wrap up this week, you might feel the pull between showing up for your responsibilities and wanting to close the door and just be alone. Virgo season knows that both are part of the cycle, and Virgo is represented by the myth of Demeter and Persephone going to the underworld and coming back above ground for creating the seasons. Like Virgoan goddesses throughout history have been goddesses of harvest, but also goddesses of seasonal change. And so this is about knowing that both are important, shadow and light, darkness, underworldliness, and above ground growth. Yeah, the service that we know about with Virgo requires restoration, being one with ourselves, sovereignty, and also remembering that true liberation comes when you remember that your work is not measured by your worth is not measured by output. It's not measured by your work, and I think that's just an important reminder for everybody. So that's the human design, I Ching, gene keys of the week. Moving on to the planetary dances, the astrological transits and aspects that are happening this week. I never go into all of them, but the ones that rise to the top feel important. And so this week, Venus is moving into Leo, and that's a big deal because it's not just a quiet slip into the sign of the lion. Venus is stepping into a stage that's already really alive with outer planet tension. The first degree of any sign is alive right now because all the outer planets are at the first degree, 0 or 1 degrees of their respective signs. So when the new moon last week hit, was activating all of these outer planets because it was at 0 degrees, and Venus crossing into Leo activates all of these planets because it's at 0 degrees. And so that's happening anytime we have a planet moving into a new sign. But Venus, especially because Leo is right across the sky from Aquarius, and guess who's in Aquarius at the first degree? Mr. Pluto, Senorita Pluto, non-gendered Pluto, but Pluto is right across the sky. So Venus will meet up with the Lord of the Underworld, just facing off right away. And then we'll also meet up with Uranus and Gemini making a sextile, and we'll trine Saturn and Neptune in Aries pretty quick, like within a few days after entering the sign. So Venus enters Leo on Monday, and then kind of bam, 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 makes all of these aspects with the outer planets that are all doing this really crazy, harmonious lineup of trines and sextiles with each other. So it's pretty. I've probably heard about it because I've talked about it a lot. Lots of astrologers are talking about it as like the background frequency for the astrology right now is this mini grand trine or magic triangle between Pluto, Uranus, and Saturn, Neptune, all of the outer generational transpersonal planets. And so that's affecting the collective in a really big way. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how Venus will highlight those. It's kind of like the goddess of love and art and pleasure. Venus is walking into a council of the Titans, with each one representing a deep collective shift. And so the aspects that she makes right away are telling us that matters of relationship and desire and what we value and money and beauty are going to be pulled into the wider, I would say, drama of our current times. We just had Mars going through Leo and retrograding in Leo. And so we experienced the Martian dynamic between Mars and all of the other planets, outer planets. So that was like the god of war walking into this council of Titans. And now we have the goddess of love walking there. So what's that going to show up like? We have Venus opposite Pluto in Aquarius, first off. And Venus in Leo wants to shine and love boldly and just be adored, truly. I have Venus in Leo, so I feel that. Pluto in Aquarius on the other side of the coin, the other side of the zodiac, is reshaping the collective in a big way, though, and digging up shadows about how groups hold power and how technology mediates intimacy and how our communities, our larger social sphere, defines what we value. So, this opposition between Venus and Pluto presses on questions of visibility, control, kind of where you dim your heart to stay acceptable, and where do you crave approval from the collective at the cost of your own personal Leo self-expression and authenticity. uh, a certain power dynamic that's exposed or highlighted here. Anytime there's an opposition between planets, it's like full moon energy, where you're kind of the light is being shined from one planet to the other and back again. It's like this reflective mirror like quality between love and power dynamic. I mean, Pluto is transformative power, and Venus is love and values. And so it's kind of the ping pong match between those, the back and forth. So I would say try as much as you can to meet that ping pong match with courage rather than manipulation. Venus, opposite, you know, Venus is not Virgo, but as a goddess, this is the only goddess of the zodiac. Venus has a certain, Virgoan quality, and Pluto is the lord of the underworld. So I think about the Persephone myth here too, of like Persephone deciding to stay in the underworld for those winter months and then be able to come back again instead of fighting it. There's a certain empowered dynamic between shining some love over into the underworld. And I see this, obviously as an intense transit, but something that is deeply needed, perhaps. So that's that. That's the first one that happens. And then we have Venus sextile Uranus in Gemini. The Uranus just moved into Gemini earlier this year. Venus moving into first degree of Leo sextiles that planet of disruption. And so, yeah, Uranus in Gemini is the restless innovator and the lightning bolt that kind of fractures old ways of thinking. It's like the future, actually, the modern ruler of Aquarius. So it's all about communication, connection, the collective, and just shaking it up to modernize the traditions that are stagnant. And Venus sextiles Uranus, and that really brings sextile as a nice harmonious aspect. It's like nothing too crazy or powerful, but it is a nice aspect that brings these energies together. And so this is going to kind of spark fresh air into relationships and to creativity a little bit, I would say. It's like giving more of an experimental vibe to our relationships, breaking us out of tired scripts. And so Pluto is going to kind of reflect back to Venus, where we've been caught up in some entrapment, perhaps, that we're not necessarily like super down with. But then Uranus with this sextile to Venus might kind of open another window and show us what is possible within relationship and within what we value and how our values are evolving. So this could show up as like meeting new people. So meeting, Gemini is all about connection and chattiness. And so it could, definitely show up as surprising meetings or flashes of attraction or creative breakthroughs and expressions. And it asks us to kind of allow love and sensuality and connection with the sensual world to move in directions that we didn't necessarily plan for. And trust that pleasure can also be a teacher. Something else that I had kind of written as a keynote there. So after that, we have Venus trine Saturn and Neptune. I don't have the dates specifically for these. I'll put them in the Substack article at Substack. Cycles of Time Substack, but these are all really happening all within this week, because they're all kind of in order, kind of at the same. So they're influencing each other at the same time. So the final one is we have Venus trining Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So the same elemental signs are always trining, making a trine to each other. So Leo is the fire sign, Aries a fire sign, and so a trine is a aspect that connects elemental, like the elements of where different planets are sitting. And so Saturn and Neptune are beginning their long work in Aries. And all of these, by the way, are retrograding. Uranus will soon retrograde, but we have Saturn and Neptune retrograde and Pluto retrograde currently. So they're all kind of backtracking. And Saturn and Neptune will be entering Pisces over the next week or two, kind of retrograding back through there for the final touch point in Pisces before moving forward in Aries for like 12 years for Neptune and 3 years for Saturn. And so right now they're still in Aries, the first degree of Aries, and being trined by Venus and Leo. So in Aries, Saturn is building the bones of the new reality. Aries is the beginning of the zodiac, and Saturn is the lord of time and karma and structure. And then Neptune's the great dissolver, and so Neptune's simultaneously dissolving. So it's like this building, dissolving energy happening at the first degree of the zodiac right now. And so Venus trining both of those is tying our personal values, our personal sensual experience of the world to this larger paradox of building and dissolving, dissolving and building. Contractions, it reminds me of contractions. My best friend just had a baby yesterday, and so I've been thinking a lot about birth and childbirth and labor. And yeah, that's what feels like it's happening in Aries right now. It's like, this process of expansion and contraction with Saturn and Neptune both there. So with Venus making this angle to them, this harmonious, energetically potent trine, Saturn is bringing discipline to love and art and aesthetics and beauty and sensuality, and kind of also what commitments really matter, and asking us what boundaries have to be respected for that to happen, for all of these great works of the heart to happen. And then Neptune dissolves the ego and asks Venus to kind of soften into devotion and compassion and imagination. And so together, it's a bit of a paradox, like I said, but they're reminding us with this trine that our loving self-expression, that's Leo, is defined by practice and practical boundaries, as well as kind of like prayer, surrender. So it's like both, reaching this heartfelt Venusian place requires both boundaries and expansion and practice and prayer. So all of these aspects coming together is bringing up a certain intimacy, which is interesting because we've just been in the gate of intimacy, and then have Venus kind of coming in and really making potent aspects to these collective outer planets. But I would say that this Venus transit through Leo is definitely going to be a kind of catalyst that ignites our heart space. Leo is the heart. Venus is connected to love. It's heart, heart, heart energy that's continuing into the next month through Virgo season as Venus is here. And there's collective shifts already underway. And so this is just kind of an ignition coming from the Venusian energy. And I'd say that it's a beautiful thing, bringing that Venusian sensibility of joy. And I talk about sensuality not necessarily as like the erotic, but it has that too. But it's more just like, how do we interact with our senses, with the world? And then for me, sensual interaction, being in the same space as people, not having a digital divide, smelling, touching, tasting, all of those kinds of things are what are igniting our connection to the larger world. And so I'd say within Virgo season, maybe more of that, more deliberate time with others that is not just kind of taken for granted. And also time with yourself, intimacy with yourself as much as you can, to connect with what it is that you are sensually surrounded by, what it is that you value. So yeah, when Venus meets the outer planets, our personal stories of love and desire and creativity become woven into the bigger myth of this era. So that's big stuff that's happening. And then meanwhile, this week, Uranus and Neptune are also aspecting each other in a sextile. They've been in this triangle situation with Pluto as well and Saturn, but this is the exact sextile this week, I believe on Thursday. And that's kind of a connection between the disruptor of Uranus and the dissolution of Neptune. And together, I'd say they're kind of creating a subtle portal of inspiration where visions of what's possible can break through. And again, the sextile is not a loud aspect. It's not bringing a lot of energy. A trine would be more what's bringing kind of more energetic convergence to these planets. But the sextile is kind of like quiet shimmer at the edge of our perceptual reality, where these bigger energies are kind of vibing with each other. And so I try to pay attention this week to your dreams, to synchronicities and serendipities that show up, to flashes of intuition, because yeah, they might be whispering a direction that you will only understand in retrospect. So yeah, pay attention to your heart, pay attention to your dreams this week. And then the final dance, planetary dance of the week, is Pluto going out of bounds on August 31st, or beginning September 1st. And Pluto out of bounds is something that I've been reading a lot about lately, and didn't have it in this episode initially, but I thought I would include it. because I'm fascinated by these kind of more rare, interesting transits that are happening. And at first, Pluto out of bounds kind of just sounds like astrology gossip. But then, yeah, when you realize what it is, it feels like, okay, this is worth talking about. And it's a pretty wild shift in the underlying tone. So we have some pretty beautiful things with Venus, I would say, even though opposing Pluto is not that easy, but Venus coming through, it feels like some good heart-centered stuff. And then Uranus sextile Neptune, good stuff. Pluto out of bounds is a little more dramatic, perhaps. First, I'll tell you what it means. When any planet is out of bounds, it means that it's kind of beyond the path of the ecliptic where it normally hangs out. So every planet has a maximum declination, which is basically how far north or south it wanders from the sun's path, which is known as the ecliptic. So the sun's path through the zodiac around the Earth from our point of view here on Earth. Planets basically follow that exact same path most of the time. And so the sun sets the limit of what the ecliptic's path is, which is 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south, because that's the tilt of the Earth's axis. And so most planets stay within these bounds, within that amount of space around the sun's path. And they kind of move like dancers who stay roughly to the same stage, the same line around the Earth. But sometimes a planet slips past that limit, and that's called going out of bounds. So Pluto is the moon goes out of bounds quite frequently, for example, but like other planets, not as much. And so Pluto doesn't go out of bounds very frequently and will be out of bounds for the next 10 years on and off, and is just starting to go out of bounds this week, the end of this week. And so when a planet is out of bounds astrologically, its energy doesn't really behave by the usual rules. It's definitely kind of like if the sun is the governor or the president or the king of the solar system, and the planet goes outside of its path that it's carved out, it's kind of like ungovernable and exaggerated and extreme and like uncontained. It's no man's land. And so that's a thing. It's kind of breaking free of the orchestra pit and climbing into the audience and rewriting the script as it goes. All right. And so for Pluto, which is the planet of, it's Hades. It's the planet of the underworld, of power, death, rebirth, shadow, transformation, the riches of the underworld you have to get really dirty to find. This is a big deal for Pluto because Pluto's already about extremity and obsession and the underworld, but when it's out of bounds, those qualities can feel untethered and eruptive or oddly creative in how they manifest. Pluto's going deeper into the underworld, I would say. And that can feel scary or that can feel illuminating. There might be more riches if you dig a little deeper down there. In creativity, this out of bounds movement can spark really bold and taboo breaking expressions that refuse to stay polite, refuse to stay within the king's realm, the sun's realm, and values and what we desire might be pushed to extremes and ask us to see where we give away our power and where we need to reclaim it. And so, yeah, like I mentioned, it will go out of bounds around August 31st, and then it's going to last about a decade, extending through November of 2035. And that's not going to be consistently out of bounds. It's going to go in and out. But for that whole period of the next 10 years, there is an out of bounds element that we're going to be dealing with, which just is like, okay, bring it. An astrologer named Rosie Finn did a lot of research, and it says she really came to the conclusion that this will be the last time that Pluto goes out of bounds in this same way for thousands, maybe like 3,000 years. I've seen this around, and I might be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, astrologers out there, but it sounds like a lot of people have done research and looked at this. So it really, if that's the case, and this is like the last out of bounds moment, it really does just align with some big energy, the 2027 paradigm shift in human design, which is the changing of the precession of the equinoxes to a new gate in the I Ching in human design mandala. And that's a major thing that's happening. This triangle, 0 degrees triangle between all of these outer planets happening at the same time is huge. We have just so much big, really big, different new configurations in the way that all of the planets are interacting and the way the Earth's interacting with them right now that we all know something massive is happening right now, maybe bigger than we ever thought we would experience in this lifetime. Certainly, I think a lot of us are kind of hitting that in an overwhelmed way or in a hopeful way, and maybe it changes day to day whether you're overwhelmed or hopeful, but there's certainly some big stuff happening. And so this Pluto out of bounds really adds to that. And I will be writing a longer article about Pluto out of bounds as part of an upcoming series that I'm going to do probably on Substack and not recorded just by virtue of time. But I'm calling it the big picture series, the kind of like long game, big view, because the more I do these weeklies about the week to week, day to day, I find them to be grounding in the current moment's energy. But I'm noticing myself and others being like, well, what about like talk about that bigger thing, that like background frequency or a little bit deeper. So I'm going to be doing a series of probably like 5 or 6 articles about that. So stay tuned for those. Join me on cyclesoftime.substack.com for that. So, yeah, to finish up, the Pluto out of bounds with Venus immediately opposing Pluto in Aquarius after stepping into Leo, and then Pluto going out of bounds immediately after that, there's a certain amplification to the charge of this transit. Venus in Leo wants love and beauty that shine and radiate because Leo is ruled by the sun. So Pluto is going out of the bounds of the sun, and Venus is in a sign that's ruled by the sun. So it's kind of this like it'll be a deep reflection. It's almost like the mirror is being held up from the sun itself to like the depths of the underworld, like more of a scope than we are usually able to see. So, that might help, dig into collective shadows and the friction between that shiny, I want to be adored love quality and the collective shadows could feel pretty volcanic. Yeah, a small encounter could turn into an obsession, or a passing spark could feel like life and death. It could feel pretty lit up and amplified with this Venus opposition. It won't last for too long. Venus is fairly fast moving, so the Venus Pluto opposition won't be happening for forever. But through the course of this week and next, aligning with eclipse season as well, there will be feelings. There will be a lot of intensity, a lot of shifting of values, a lot of deep thoughts and deep feels, not to scare you, but just to put that out there, that this is feeling like there's some dramatic mirroring that could be happening. The gift of it, though, is that Pluto out of bounds can really dig us deeper into that collective gift, that gold that exists deep within the core of the earth. And it can strip away distortion and push us towards intimacy and art and value systems that are braver and truer and actually more aligned. Sometimes you have to dig really deep to hit water. I know that because I live in the desert, and it's just very true, and truer these days. So that's kind of what we're doing here. We're having to dig a little deeper. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up here soon, but I'm going to just do a few points about how this week could show up for you beyond what I've said. And then I do have a ritual for the intimacy of aloneness, a ritual where you can find the written version on Cycles of Time Substack. So join me there. I'll give you a little overview of that as well. And then we'll close. But basically, this week could show up for you as intimacy and merging, a desire for intimacy and merging, feeling drawn into deeper connection, whether that's creative, emotional, sexual walls or defenses that you've had up might be dissolving a little bit for better or worse, and honesty and transparency, bringing out trust and nourishment with people that are in your life. After that, with gate 40, theme might be solitude and restoration, kind of craving alone time after intense connection, and recognizing that withdrawal is not rejection, but it's actually replenishment, and thinking of any time that you have to say no or not show up to the party, or just think of it as replenishment, not saying no per se. Discovering the intimacy of aloneness and meeting yourself without a mask. After you've done that with others, sometimes it's easier to be vulnerable with others than with ourselves. And once we've done that with others, we can then come back and sit in our own space and recognize what it is we've been hiding from our own selves, and learning that true service requires restoration and boundaries. Know that energy is building slowly through Virgo season towards these eclipses. So there's like a certain momentum that's building, and you might feel that. I think that taking small daily acts of exercise and tidying up and Virgoing kind of day-to-day things are really important right now, and noticing what routines and practices are serving you and which ones need adjusting, and then just like setting into those routines for fall. With Venus entering Leo, there's definitely, yeah, some power dynamics in love, the consideration of approval from the collective versus authentic self-expression. We might have some for surprises and breakthroughs and fresh creative sparks with Venus sextiling Uranus and Gemini. And with Venus making a trine to Saturn and Neptune in Aries, there's, yeah, this balance between structure and commitment to our sensuality, our love, and our beauty and our values, and then also dissolving ego in that realm and being open to devotion and imagination. And so overall, it's kind of a paradoxical week, moving between intimacy and aloneness and refinement and rebellion, and it's definitely one of those that's not doesn't have a singular theme, but it is about holding both, and I do think intimacy of aloneness is going to come through quite a lot. Yeah, the heart is asking to kind of shine. It's a heart-centered time, and the soul, deeper selves also need some quiet replenishment and to be in the darkness. So it's a shadow and shine kind of week. That has been coming up for me a lot lately, that term, shadow and shine, like needing both in our lives, recognizing the dark and the light within us. Check out the Substack for the ritual. It is basically just sitting alone and being with yourself and feeling the ground holding you, talking to yourself. It's important to actually vocalize to yourself sometimes, but being with yourself, I would say over the weekend would be a good time to do this ritual. And it doesn't involve much beyond a candle and a nice quiet space that you can be in by yourself. But I'll leave it there. I hope you have a really beautiful week ahead, and I hope that's with others and with yourself, like letting yourself just break down some barriers with other people that you love and value, and also with your deepest soul. So I'll see you next week. We're going to be jumping in straight into eclipse territory. I think next week I'll be talking about the lunar eclipse. And if you'd like your horoscopes for that, you can find them on Substack as well, on my Cycles of Time page, horoscopes for the eclipse season for all the different rising signs. As that becomes more prescient, check that article out. And join Embody the Revolution if you'd like to dive a little deeper. The next breathwork session will be on September 3rd, Wednesday at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and that is a Virgo season overview about the elements and archetypes of the harvest goddess, and then we go into an embodied, a conscious connected breathwork session where we really allow the energies of the season to show up in our bodies. And this month's themes are about sovereignty and discernment and service to ourselves and others. So I hope you join me. You can subscribe there on cyclesoftime.substack.com, or follow me at Astrosomatics or Cycles of Time Podcast on Instagram. And I'll see you next week to dive into that lunar eclipse in Pisces. Have a great week.